Hey there guys, my name is Darren Arbuckle and today I'm going to be talking to you about the 6 elements of building and maintaining your Monday.com infrastructure. Monday.com is an absolutely fantastic tool, by which you probably know or might not know, but building boards is quite simple, but building and maintaining the infrastructure is a little bit more difficult. It's not just focused on development, it's really focused about quite a few elements. And in this video, I'm going to be taking you through those elements. Okay, I'm also going to be cutting these videos down into some video series as well, just to create smaller bits of content as well. So yeah, if you're watching one of those, just know that there is more videos and there's one long video. Okay, all right. But with that, what I want to do is let's dive into what the 6 elements are. Okay, so first off, you have got planning. Okay, so yes, Monday.com is really easy. You can literally jump into Monday, build a board and start adding columns left, right and center. It's really easy to get started, so simple. But the thing is that there's so much planning that actually should be involved before you start developing a board. Now listen, simple boards are okay. Okay, I mean if you're creating a simple task list or something very simple, then you won't need a lot of planning. But if you're thinking of building something quite complicated that's involving a lot of departments and the workflows are very complex, you are definitely going to need some planning, okay? It is important that you do this. If you don't plan, you plan to fail. And I'll be touching about planning in just a couple of moments. The second part, which everyone knows, is the development side. So you've planned your system, you've got your architecture, and now you actually need to start developing. And there's tons of content around development. Monday.com has got massive amounts of content to show you how to use Monday.com and how to build. And the development side is one of the most, most people typically focus on that point. But yeah, this is the development side. This is when you're actually building the board itself and building the automations, building the integrations, and all of that lovely stuff. The third one, which is not so fun, is the documentation. I have yet to meet freelancers that actually document their Monday.com builds. I have yet to meet many people that actually document it. See, the thing with Monday.com is that because it's so easy, and when you're building it, it's like you have the workflow in your head, right? And if you ever have to transfer that to someone, it is really difficult to explain. Again, the simpler, the easier it is. However, if you've got, let's say, 10, 15, 20 systems, I mean, Monday.com can be used in multiple departments across the organization, and those systems could all touch with each other. And the problem is that if all of this information is in your head, if you want to start handing it off to someone, it's going to be a very, very long journey, because how do you communicate what's in your head to them? And also, how will you remember? That's the other thing. I mean, you could build something a year ago and someone says, how does this work? That's a good question. How does it work? Then you have to go back, kind of relearn. And if you haven't really done your documentation in place, you will struggle when it comes down to supporting and handover. The fourth thing is onboarding and training, which is, this is the most difficult part of it. If you're bringing Monday.com into your organization, you need to understand how you are going to implement how you're going to roll it out to the company, and how you're going to get your users to adopt this technology. There are so many companies out there that are like, Monday.com, yeah, let's do it. And then they fail with the change management side of things. And then suddenly it's like, oh, this technology doesn't work for us. It's like, no, you have a people problem. The onboarding and training is really, really important. And you need to understand how to effectively do that. Because if you fail to do this part, no matter what system, no matter how much planning you've done, no matter how much development you've done, and no matter how much you've documented, if you don't onboard your team properly, all of that work you're going to do, waste. Okay. The fifth one is support and continuous improvement. I love to tell my clients that building the perfect system takes time. What you think might be perfect in the long run, over time, there's always these little subtle improvements. Okay, and you also have to consider supporting people. Now, obviously, you have to think about when you build a system, you've got your current users and you're moving them over from system A to your new Monday.com system. And you obviously have to do a lot of hand holding. You need to make certain they've got all the material to make themselves independent. and you really need to understand how to handle their support requests and how to communicate with them. And the other thing is also the continuous improvement is, especially the people that are using your system, they're going to give you a lot of recommendations, and you kind of have to go, does this recommendation make sense? Should I add it? Because the problem again with Monday.com is that, oh yeah, I could add this feature, I can add this feature, and eventually you end up with this huge system, and it's so convoluted and complicated. So the people that have been using it, obviously because they've been using it, it's simple for them. But when you're trying to train new people on it, it's chaos. So with continuous improvement, you have to think, okay, well, what is the correct way to do it? What are the features you should do, and how should you manage that? Okay, and then the last one, which is personally my favorite, is reporting. This is obviously with Monday.com, you've got the system, but management wants the reports. They want to, I mean, if you're building a CRM on here, you have to think, okay, well, what do we want to report on? We want to see the sales activity that the sales agent's doing. We want to see how many leads we're generating. We want to be able to forecast our pipeline. We want to see our conversion rates. So you have to think about the reporting side, and there's so many questions that you need to think about with reporting, because you need to understand, does Monday.com have the capability to fulfill your reporting requirements, and so on. Okay, so these are really the six things that you really need to consider. One thing that I'm thinking of is also like governance and data privacy and all of that lovely stuff. But I mean, we can put that with regards to the planning and documentation. Okay, and one thing I do want to mention is that most people only focus on the developments and they pay kind of little attention to the rest. And I promise you that if you do this, this is going to cause short and long-term issues. Okay, and this is ultimately the big issue. It creates a key man dependency in your organization and puts your systems at risk. The problem is a lot of companies have got 1 to maybe 2 users that are ultimately responsible for the Monday.com builds in the organization itself. Okay, and the problem is that if these people are not documenting what they're doing and they are not explaining the back-end stuff, like you might know how it works on a front end, but you don't understand, especially when you're integrating with lots of different applications and you're using third-party tools, then it becomes very complicated. And the problem is, and this is a horrible realization, is that imagine that person just disappears. I mean, they could win the lotto, they could be hit by a bus, or they could be hired by another company, and all of the knowledge is sitting in their head, and your entire business runs on this. And that ultimately is the big issue, and that is why you really need to understand the 6 elements over here to avoid this. Okay, and that is what we're going to be talking about, exactly as I mentioned in the previous slide. We're going to be talking about the planning, development, documentation, onboarding and training, supporting continuous improvement, and reporting. Each one is a video, and I'm going to be taking you through that. So we're going to jump into the next video, which is planning. So part 1, planning. Why plan? Okay, well, you probably heard this a million times. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Okay, that's ultimately how it works. And I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios as to why planning will benefit your organization. And I also, even if you're saying, Darren, yes, I do plan, you have to think about how extensive the planning is. Right, like I said, with simple systems, requires simple planning. With complex systems, extensive planning. So this is why you should plan. Okay, the first one is that it's going to help you to avoid loss of time, money, training, and development. The problem, especially if you're doing Monday.com yourself, is that you may not know 100% the functionalities of Monday.com, which means you're not using the tool to its full potential. And obviously, because you're doing that, what could happen is that you feel that the system doesn't suit your needs, when you could actually be holding the solution in your hands. It just hasn't been configured properly. Okay. The other thing is that if you build the system, okay, and I've found this many times, is that companies quickly build something up And then in the long run, they eventually start saying, oh, we actually need this feature. And then when you're trying to do it and you realize that the system that you've built can't do it, or Monday.com is unable to actually do that, all of the time you spent learning about the system, developing, testing it, getting your team to use it, and creating all the material to train them how to use it, it's all gone. And that's the same with any low-code, no-code system, not just Monday. Many companies start building their solutions on a system, realize it doesn't work, and have to move over. And you just have to think about the amount of time that was lost. But if you actually sat down and thought about as much as you need, I'm saying you can't think of everything, but if you spend more time focusing on the system functionalities, the permissions, the fields of data, the workflow, it will really help you to ensure that the system you're building is well thought out and would most certainly be able to be used by the company in the long run. Okay. And that's where I speak about you get a clear understanding of what you need to develop. So the thing is that even before you do with Monday.com, you really need to plan the system out. And you need to say, okay, well, I know that the technology needs to do X, Y, and Z. And what's really helpful here is that, especially when you're thinking about using any low-code, no-code system, you know what questions that you kind of need to ask, and you can go and ask the sales agent or the consultant that's obviously saying you should go with the system. You should be able, you can ask them these questions and say, will it do this, will it do this, will it do this? And it's about really understanding what are obviously the critical features that you need to have. So for instance, you've got things called walkaway features, where if the system cannot do this, we walk away from it. It means we cannot utilize it. Obviously, the more walkaway features you have, the more difficult it would be to find the perfect solution for you. And I mean, that's where low-code, no-code is really cool, is that you can really customize it for you. But you need to understand all of your walkaway features, and if you see the low-code, no-code does not have the ability to be able to perform that walkaway function, you then need to keep your eyes out for different technology. Okay. The other thing with planning, and this is going to be talking about point 4, which is onboarding, is that it will also help you communicate the value to future users as well as management. The thing is that with regards to building a low-code, no-code system, with simple workflows, you don't really need a lot of development. Okay, it really is easy to get here. But when you're starting to think about how you can get this low-code, no-code system to integrate within your entire business, it becomes complicated. And then you might, and really there's only 5 options you can really kind of go over here. The first one is that you do it yourself. The second one is you work with a freelancer. The third one is you work with a Monday.com consulting company like FinLink. The fourth one is that you get extensive training for an individual in your company to make it for you. Or the fifth one is that you actually hire someone that is a Monday.com expert, which obviously is a very expensive option. And you kind of need to really define the value of Monday.com. And also in this planning stage, you can really identify the cost of the pain that your system that you're wanting to build is going to solve for you. So that when you need to go to the owner or the CFO or your finance department and say, I want to bring Monday.com in because it's going to do this, and this is the return of investment we're going to get. And technology can be quite expensive, especially when it comes down to licensing. I mean, Monday.com on the pro user license, you roughly have about $24. And then, if I'm not mistaken, with enterprise, it's roughly about over $50, including the CRM functionality, or that could actually even just be for the base Monday.com core product. So, I mean, if you've got, let's say, 20 users in the company at $50 a pop, you're looking at around $1,000 a month. Okay. Over 12 months, I mean, that's 12K. That's roughly about $12,000. That's a fair bit of money, and you need to be able to communicate the why finance should actually fund that cost to your company. Okay, it's extremely important that you understand that, and planning will help you be able to have that argument and communicate it. The other thing I also want to mention is that in those planning sessions, it's important to have people involved that are going to be using your system, because they're going to tell you their pain points, and what can happen is that you can then explain the value that the system is going to give to them. And I'll cover that more in part 4. but you really want to communicate the value to them, because ultimately they decide if they're going to use the system or not, really. So yeah, you want to do that. And the last reason that I'm going to maybe explain is the technology rollout. You need to be able to plan the rollout of how you want to get this technology into your company. And because what you really want is you want to have really good user adoption. And if you haven't planned not just the system, I'm talking about rolling out Monday.com into the organization as a whole. Now, if you're only getting it for your department, okay, that's good for you. But if you see this as a tool to centralize your systems and IT infrastructure and remove the data silos, you definitely have to think about your rollout plan here. Because the problem is that if you don't think about this and you do this poorly, you're going to have poor user adoption, and any money that you spend on the system is going, again, to our first point, it's going to be a waste of time, money, training, and development. And listen, there are so many other reasons as to why planning is important. And one of the things that I've actually done is that I have actually created a webinar with my partner, Tristan Long, in the UK, and we have explained how to design a bespoke system architecture in 7 steps. And we talk a lot about how to plan for your system. So it's actually a webinar. If you want, I will have a link that allows you to come and join that webinar. And if the webinar is already done, I will also provide you with a recording of that webinar. So really, that is all there is. That's all I have to say right now about the planning. There is a lot more to discuss about it. But yeah, we're going to move on into the next video, which is part 2, development. All right, so here we are with part 2, development, and obviously this is the one where everyone is very interested about. There's lots of material, as I said, that talks about developing in Monday.com. There's thousands of videos that you can really go and access. In fact, I'll explain later, I've even got a free course around the development side of things, okay? And there's a couple of things that you need to really consider. So first off, anyone can really develop a system in Monday.com, but you really want someone that will be able to get the full value of the system. And you really should consider who should be building the solutions. And typically, what I find, it's very good to have someone that's very process and systems orientated. So if you can think of someone like that in the organization, they also need to have a little bit of an understanding around data analytics, and they need to have a certain level of data literacy. Because obviously you're building the report in order to you're building the system in order to build the reports later down the line. So they need to kind of understand the data points that they need to collect, okay? And they also need to kind of be really good with regards to technology. They need to be able to learn quite quickly, especially if you're bringing in Monday.com at the beginning. You need someone that can just look at a system and after a day or two, like really, really hone on it. And there's some seriously amazing people out there that have been able to build amazing things in such a short amount of time. But then these are very experienced individuals. Okay, so really think about who should build the solution. And then remember what I spoke about with my key man issue. It might not just be one. You might want a couple of people to be working on the solutions. Don't just make it one person. If it's the owner, I understand that obviously you have more control there, but you can get sick and you could end up in hospital. So that's what I'm saying. Be very careful about who you choose to build the solution. Make certain that it's not just one person. The next thing is that you need to consider the Monday.com build best practices, and they are, okay? I know it's easy to build on Monday.com, and Monday.com is like this open canvas, and you can just go absolutely nuts with what you build in here. I love this tool because I can build anything I really want to, and then with third-party integration tools and be able to leverage the API, you can go crazy. But you have to understand the best practices, and you need to understand the limitations of the tool itself. So you need to understand, okay, well, let me see if I can come up with a couple of examples. So for instance, what is the best way for a user to input information into the board? What is the best hierarchy to put this? What is the best way for them to view this information? What is the best way to determine what the trigger is going to be? Should we use a button? Should we use a status? And you really need to understand a lot of the best practices in order to get the full value of the system itself. And it takes time to actually get that. So yeah, really consider the Monday.com build best practices. The third one is that Monday.com does integrate with a lot of apps, and you can easily go in and integrate. But you might be going into the integrations and saying, I don't see my app here. It doesn't mean that Monday.com doesn't integrate with it. Okay? You still can. But it does take a little bit more effort in order to actually get that to work. So you need to know how to integrate with apps not in the native integrations within Monday.com. You see, Monday.com has got an open API. Right, so if you have a little bit of API knowledge, you would be able to create streams where you'd be able to connect app 1 with Monday.com and app 2 with Monday.com and app 3 and so on. And then if you haven't really got a developer abilities, then you can also use third-party tools like Zapier and Meg. And again, then you kind of need someone also a bit technically minded that understands the best practices with there. Because the problem is that, especially with automations and integrations, you need to understand that automations and integrations come at a cost. Okay, automations, integrations are not free. So with Monday.com, you have, for Pro version, standard you have 250 automations, Pro you have 225,000, and then Enterprise you have 250,000 integrations. Okay, I never bother with the standard plan. I mean, if you're going to automate 250 actions, I mean, what's the bloody point? I always typically look at Pro. But you have 25,000 automations and 25,000 integrations. Now the difference between an automation and an integration, an automation is basically an activity that is happening internally within Monday.com. An integration is when Monday.com is connecting with a third-party application. So that means, in essence, you've got 25,000 automation opportunities plus another 25,000 integration activities. The one thing that you have to consider though is once you run out of the 25,000, it does push you up to the next tier, which is Enterprise, 250,000. And it's very hard to knock that number. It's possible, but you need to understand exactly what should you automate and so on. And that's actually the fourth point that I wanted to mention, is like what should be automated, and then obviously they need to be able to automate it. Don't just automate everything. Really think about the value of the automation, understand how it's going to help you. Is it going to make someone's life easier? Is it going to improve the data quality of your reports? Why should you automate it? Because the more you automate, eventually the more your licensing costs are going to be. Okay. And again, there's so much more to discuss about the development side. But the most important aspect of development is this. Yes. Keep it simple, stupid. When I started building Monday.com, I wanted to show off how clever I was by building these systems that looked amazing, and there was so much automation, but it was complicated, really complicated. And I was dumb. That was stupid. Really. Try and keep it simple as possible. I kid you not, this is the most important thing that you need to focus on when you're building a Monday.com. Monday.com is a very simple system to use, but I promise you, you can make it complicated. It's very easy to make it complicated. So keep it simple. Your users are going to thank you for doing that, and it's just going to make training and onboarding so much more simpler. So yeah, absolutely, keep it simple. All right, and as I was mentioning, is that the first thing that you really need to do is you need to understand the functionality of Monday.com really well. Before you start building them, just get to know the system a little bit better. And what I've done is I have created a course called How to Use 80% of Monday.com in just 75 minutes. Okay, your time is precious. I understand that in Monday.com, really, it is very easy to kind of go through 80% of the functions. And you can really understand a lot of that in this course. I will attach the link below so you can go through that course. It's free. I don't even need your email. It's literally just a link and a website that I put together, and you can just go through each one. I think there's roughly about 16 plus tutorial videos. We talk about the workspaces, privacy, security, views, automations, integrations. lots and lots of stuff. So if you want to go take a look at that, you can easily just click on the link and it'll take you there. All right, but there we go. That is basically part 2 of the program. And what we're going to do is we're going to go talk about part 3, the documentation side, and I'll see you in that next video. Part 3, documentation. No one likes this part. No one likes doing this. It's horrible. In fact, the documentation can take longer than the development. I mean, developing on Monday.com is really quick. Documenting, my gosh, it's so time consuming, depending again on the complexity. Simple systems, not really, it's super easy, but when there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of automations and there's a lot of integrations and you're connecting with third-party apps, it gets very complicated. But why must you document? Well, first off, especially with me as a Monday.com consulting company, we do work with a lot of clients and we are building a lot of Monday.com systems. And typically what happens is that sometimes someone asks us a question about the system maybe a year or 6 months after we've actually built the solution. And because we're building so many different solutions, we forget it. We don't know exactly where the part is, because what could happen is that there could be a break somewhere. And it could either be a Monday.com bug, or it could be that someone isn't following the process in the Monday.com board correctly. And if we don't have that documentation, we have to go back and look at the board and go, okay, where is this issue? And we have to kind of remember, what is the trigger? We need to remember, okay, but remember, you could have a trigger that activates something, that is another trigger that activates something in a different application that activates another thing. I mean, it's ridiculous. And if you don't document that, it's going to take you a very long time in order to actually find what the bug or the problem is and then communicate the solution through to the client. And if you're doing this internally, the thing that you also have to remember is that documenting also allows you to easily hand over systems, right? If you're the owner of the business, just understand that you are basically the main go-to person when something is wrong with Monday.com. And eventually, I promise you are going to want to hand that over. But the issue is that if all these systems that you've built are in your head, and again, this is not just with Monday.com. I once had this client, and it was the most amazing Google Sheet system I'd ever seen. This guy was so clued up, and it just worked so nicely in his business. The only problem with it was it just wasn't scalable. And when I took a look at this, and it was so much work to actually move over to a Monday.com system, and also I don't know, he didn't really have any documentation with regards to how we would be able to do that. So it would have taken him months to actually communicate what everything does. So especially when you're working with a consultant or a freelancer, you would pay them to be able to communicate what you want the system to do, and then you'd pay them again to actually build the system. Okay, because if you don't document the stuff, it's going to be harder for you to be able to communicate exactly what the system needs to do. That includes support. Even if you're not moving from an app to another app, and you're just saying, listen, I want you to hand over this. I want you to take over the system. If you can't hand over that support, it's always going to be stuck with you. And you really want those documents to be able to help the individuals that you want to be able to support understand the system quicker and to be able to support your users better. Okay. The other thing is that it helps you to communicate changes. That's also documentation. You're not going to have the perfect system on the get-go, and you're going to have a change log, and you need to be able to communicate those changes to people in the over the course of time. Because obviously you might change something like a trigger was activating this, but now it's activating this. And obviously if you aren't documenting those changes and you want to then start onboarding new people to the system and you have the old stuff, well, they're not going to really be aware. They're not going to really understand that. So you have to constantly keep documenting the changes, especially for your new staff going forward. Okay, and documentation resolves a huge issue that I find with most low-code, no-code systems. It helps you avoid key man issues. I kid you not, this is a this is a terrible risk for your company. Absolutely terrible. You have to really consider about this. This is a huge issue in organizations, especially with these low-code, no-code systems that run your entire business workflows. If the key man that is responsible for the development vanishes, and you've got all these workflows working on the system and something goes down, business stops. That's the problem with having everything in one place. It stops. And if you haven't got the support to actually resolve that, and I'm not talking about technical support. Like Monday.com, technical support is amazing. But I'm talking about the actual workflows, the way that your developer within your organization has actually built your system. Monday.com doesn't know that workflow. And if there's no documentation, no one can go and look. You would have to phone him. Hopefully he's on holiday and he's happy to take a call. But if the guy's in a coma or she's in a coma, what are you going to do? It's a huge, huge risk for companies. And that is why documentation is so important. And it mustn't just be stupid documentation. You need to make certain that you can hand over that documentation so that someone will be able to resolve issues. Okay. Now, documentation is very tricky, and one of the things that I have done is I've actually got a boot camp where we call Develop an Internal Monday.com Champion for Your Business, and we go through how to actually document all the stuff. So this is a 2-day virtual boot camp. I basically run 1 or 2 a month, depending on the month. Really, I only have, I basically take 10 people from different organizations, and we basically just go through the boot camp. And we teach them, we go more in depth about planning, development, documentation, onboarding and training, the supporting continuous improvement as well as reporting. We go way more in depth than what I'm doing in this video. I'm just touching on this stuff. But that is a program, and really, I honestly think that you need one or two users at least to come into the program itself. And that's where I can actually help and teach your team how to document their Monday.com systems, so that it allows for easy handover and allows them to support. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I will see you in the next video, which is where we're going to be talking about the training and onboarding, which is the most difficult part of this actually, and I'll see you there. Okay. Hello. Today we are talking about part 4, onboarding and training. Okay, so this is a very fun section of my job. No, it's not really. This is the worst part of it, to be honest with you. Onboarding and training is an absolute mission. And the reason why it is such a mission is because it involves change management. No one likes change. No one. No matter, even if the system is going to change their lives and make things better, if it's change, you will definitely face resistance, and it is difficult. It is the most hard part of actually implementing a low-code, no-code system, is getting people to use the system. Okay, that is one of the biggest issues. And basically, you have to remember that your team will use the system if it benefits them, or if you have someone with massive authority pushing it. Okay, those are your two options. You either have to basically have a carrot or stick approach. You have to go to the users and say, listen, when we were doing the planning, you told me that the current way you're doing this is really shocking and you hate this part. The system resolves that. It's going to really make your time easier. And I understand that you have to push through to learn the system, and I understand it's going to feel uncomfortable, but I promise you, once you're on that other side, life is going to be great. But just remember, they still the light is at the end of the tunnel, but there's still a dark tunnel that they want to run through, and they always want to run back to their previous system. Okay, so that's one approach. The other one is that you have someone with huge authority that basically goes, use the system or you're fired. That approach works too. And listen, there's a whole bunch of grumbling, and people hate me when it's that approach. No one likes me with that one. But the fact is that you definitely need someone with authority pushing it. So, for instance, as an example, imagine with the CRM, a salesperson doesn't like it, and what happens is that they aren't putting their deals through. So when the guy looks, so management could look at it and go, "Oh, I see that we haven't closed that deal." Salesperson goes, "No, I did." Management goes, "It's not on the system. No com." No, but I closed it. No com. You can use that approach as well, forcing them to actually use it. But again, it really depends on the culture of your company as well as you. Change management, really, there are companies that specialize in this, and for good reason. Change management is a very hard thing to do. It is very, very difficult. So if you are thinking about bringing in any form of technology, you need to think about the change management, and it is definitely worth the money to find a change management company that can help you with that. Okay, but what you have to do when you are busy planning the system, you need to involve the team in the planning process. Okay, you need to hear what their frustrations are with the old system. You need to understand what they want the new system to do. Okay, because what can happen is that when you are busy onboarding and training them, you can communicate the benefit to them because you were able to get the input. So it's very important that you do that. The other thing you need to make them do is you need to make them understand why the need for change. I have literally had people saying, why do we need this new system? The system worked perfectly for me. Yes, it worked perfectly for you, but management wasn't getting the reports they need. The data quality was shocking. We needed to find a way to improve the data quality, because what happens is that if the management isn't getting the reports they need, they're not able to make data-informed decisions, which means that they could have bad decisions. And if they're doing bad decisions, there could be loss of revenue in the company, which means you could lose your job because we need to retrench because we're not making as much money, right? Obviously, that's a very wild case, but you need to make them understand why they need this system or why the company needs this system, okay? And again, show them the value it provides for them, okay? Again, people, as much as we like to think that people love the companies as much as we do, the owners, they don't. People are selfish. They are in it for them. So if you can show them the value for them, they will use the system. If they feel like you're making their life miserable, it's going to be a very, very hard slog for you to actually get them to use the system properly. They will use it bitterly and maybe not as effectively, and that's obviously going to create a lot of tension in the organization. So try and figure out how you can inform them about the value. The next thing that you have to do is that not only do you have to onboard them, but you need to train them. Okay, so you can't just say click here, click here, click here, click here, click here. People don't remember that. You need to actually create the training material. You need to put presentations together like this. You need to create tutorial videos. You need to have a help desk where if they have an issue, you can support them. But you need to actually create the training material for them to do that, and that is also very time consuming. And you typically only do this after you have gotten your first draft approved. Don't create the training material once that first draft is approved, because the suck thing is this: there are going to be changes, and when there are changes, you're going to go and have to change the training material, and that is absolutely horrible. It's one of the biggest issues I have in my organization. But the fact is that it has to be done, because if you do not update your training material and you're bringing new people onto the system, they're going to be learning the old way of doing things, and it's not going to work, and they're going to be confused. Okay, then suddenly you have your current staff that are doing the new way, they're bringing on new staff that are doing it the old way, and now suddenly there's going to be a bit of issues. So you need to keep updating your training material. Then you also need to conduct the onboarding sessions, and typically, this actually involves showing them how the system's going to work and taking them through and making them kind of try and show you how they could do it, and just conduct the onboarding session with them. And again, obviously, it depends on exactly the culture of your company. I mean, you could be most of your staff could be in office. It could be a hybrid, or it could be a remote-only business. And obviously, you need to try and figure out exactly how you're going to onboard these people It's not like you could stand behind the computer and say, okay, show me how to do this. And also, if there's quite a lot of people that you're bringing onto the system, I mean, I've had to onboard companies where there's roughly about 200 people that are using the system. I can't really do a one-on-one with them. I have to show all 200. And all of them have got different questions. So you really need to understand how you can actually conduct those onboarding sessions. Nice and fun. Then you also have to have working sessions. So after you've done the onboarding session, you need to actually organize times in the calendar where people are using the system, and you need them to come in and say, oh, hey, I had a question about this system. How do I do it? This is how you do it. Okay, cool stuff. And then another working session on another day. And it could be like 30 minutes or an hour, and you have people come in and ask questions, and you're really just giving them just a really good level of support as you are onboarding them. So it really is important that you do that. Okay. And again, guys, as I was saying, is that again, with training and onboarding, there's so much to talk about with regards to this. I do talk about it in the internalmonday.com champion for your business bootcamp. It's where we actually create monday.com champions for organizations. It's a 2-day virtual bootcamp. I have roughly about 2 of these a month. And if you want to really see more about that, I'll put a link for you to go and take a look and see all about that. Okay, but in the next video, we're going to be talking about part 5, which is the support and continuous improvement. Hi there guys, welcome back to part 5, support and continuous improvement. And in this video, we're going to be talking about how you can support your team that is using the monday.com infrastructure that you have built for them, and how you can continuously improve it. And also I want to mention, this is also how you get more of the company to adopt monday.com. So obviously, if you're bringing this technology in, this is the rollout, you need to think, okay, we could start with the marketing department, then the finance department, and so on and so on, and how you're going to get the company to adopt it. Okay, so first off, the one thing I want to mention to you is that your first draft is never perfect. So you are always going to be improving your system. Okay? Just understand that. And the way that you do this is that obviously you're going to get a lot of information from support requests, because you can see, oh, there's a bug, let's fix that. Or you get feature requests. So I'm going to split this video up into the 2 parts. So the first one we're going to talk about is support. And what I want to explain to you is I want you to understand something, that why handling support sucks. Okay, it really does. And the reason why I wanted to explain this is because most people that develop the monday.com solution have other responsibilities, especially if they're in your organization. Okay, and that is a huge issue, because the problem is that a person could say, oh, I've got to fix this, and the other person is maybe in a meeting or is just unavailable at that point in time. And because they're getting all these support requests, they kind of have to drop what they're doing and fix it, or the person has to kind of wait for them to be able to fix their solution. Right? I mean, that's hours. And it's frustrating for, number one, the person that is issuing the support request, because obviously they want their solution resolved. And then secondly, it sucks for the person that has to support them, because they're busy and now they have to drop what they're doing, which is super irritating. But yeah, so you need to understand that. Another thing, I know I talked to you about documentation and training material, and a harsh thing for you to realize is this, and for me, people are lazy and don't read the material you give them. They will just ask you on WhatsApp because it's easier. It happens. It sucks. But the fact is, you still need the training material, because the problem is that, again, you have the handover, and it is frustrating when people are not actually reading the material. There's nothing worse when someone asks you a question and you say, but there's a video that explains this. It says it right here. And they're like, oh, yeah, I don't have time to watch the video. You want to strangle people. Okay. And then the other thing is also seeing a support request come through, which honestly could take a minute or 2 to resolve, eradicates concentration on deep work activities. Remember what I was talking about, where the other person has responsibilities, and let's say that they are actually building a monday.com solution, and suddenly some some person just says, hey, I just wanted to let you know that the status didn't change. Why is that? Well, if you took a look at the video, you would understand that you have to do this first. Oh, thank you. That is literally a 1-minute conversation engagement. But now what happens is I drop my deep work, I go and fix their problem, and now I've lost my concentration and I have to build that momentum again. It is frustrating. And you have to understand that whoever builds the system, that is your life. Okay? That is what you're going to be dealing with. Now, obviously, with Monday.com, you don't get a lot of support workflow requests, especially if you have 1 or 2 systems. But if you've got the entire company working on it, I promise you, you're going to get requests. Because remember, your company is also hiring new people, which means that they will be talking about the problems that other people have lost before. So just understand, this is pretty much the life of someone that has to support them. Okay, so that's support. Let's talk about how to handle feature requests. This is my favorite line. Just because someone has a problem doesn't mean the system or the company has a problem. People want to make their lives as easy as possible. They would love to automate themselves out of business, but they do want to still be paid to actually do for the work. You have to really think about, is this worth putting into the system? And there has to be some process in place where you have a product owner. Because in all honesty, Monday.com, your Monday.com system or infrastructure, someone has to be the product owner for that. And they need to basically decide, should we add this feature, should we not? If not, you need to communicate why, because obviously you're going to get a very annoyed person that says, they don't listen to me and I'm not going to give any more feature requests. And if the product manager says, actually, this is a fantastic idea, yes, let's do that. Okay. This brings me to my second point, because the problem with Monday.com is that it's so easy to add feature requests, to add features and add columns, that you could actually create an extremely convoluted system. Okay, you want to make certain that you understand that the feature that you're adding talks to the purpose of the system. And again, this purpose is spoken about in the planning stage. Because the problem is that if you keep adding feature after feature after feature after feature, you're going to get this extremely convoluted tech bloat, and eventually the system is not going to be user-friendly. Remember we spoke about the most important thing, KISS? Well, the more features you add to something and the more clicks you put to something, the less KISS it is. So be very, very careful about what features you are adding to your system and ensure that it speaks to the purpose. The third thing, ask yourself this question: what value will this feature add and how should you prioritize it? It is very important. You don't just go and say, boom, new feature, done. Boom, new feature, done. Because what happens? Especially if you've got lots of people working on the system and suddenly there's this new magical button column that's added, everyone's like, what the hell is this? What does this do? I'm now confused. What are we supposed to do? You need to basically communicate the changes. And the more changes you make to a system, the harder it is, or not the harder it is to have the conversation. It's more just, it's going to be difficult for people. They might get a little bit resistant to the change itself. Even if it is in Monday.com, you need to explain why the change is happening, what the change is, and you need to have a change log, and you can communicate that. And you also want to prioritize. Yes, it might take you 2 days to add a feature to Monday.com, or like 30 seconds, but you really should choose how to prioritize it. Like, in this week I'm going to do this one, in this week I'm going to do this one, in this week I'm going to do this one. So then that way your team isn't inundated from these new changes. Because imagine that your team uses the system and suddenly you bring in 10 different changes based on all the feature requests, because it talks to the person and will add lots of value. It's definitely gonna hurt the team, and just be very careful about that. Okay. Again, with regards to support and feature requests, I've just touched on the subject here. There is more about it in our Ultimate Monday.com Champion Development Program. I do talk about it. It's a 2-day, full-day virtual bootcamp. We've got a virtual conference center where 10 of us come together and we just talk about how to build a Monday.com champion to be able to build and maintain your Monday.com infrastructure. Okay, but I will see you in our last video, which is part 6, reporting. Hi there guys, and welcome to the last video, part 6, reporting. This is by far one of my favorite parts of Monday.com, and especially when it comes down to building the systems. I love giving the reports to management to just give them more informed decisions, and really this is what most people really like about the systems, like what reports can we get out of it. And there are a couple of things that you definitely need to take into account. And you need to think about the scalability of your Monday.com solution over here, especially in this section. But I'm going to take you through a couple of those. So, what is your reporting need? You need to ask yourself 3 questions. First off, do you need advanced analytics? And when I mean advanced analytics, I mean you need to be able to drill down to the nth degree. You need to be able to see extremely customized data visualizations that really does present a story. So the thing is that you've got visualization tools such as Power BI, Click, Tableau, and so on, and then you've got the Monday.com dashboard. So obviously there are benefits, pros and cons to each one, and you need to identify, will I get enough value from the Monday.com reporting? And I'll talk about that in question 3 over here. But you need to think, okay, how much do I need? If you need advanced analytics, you're going to think, okay, that means you need to find a way how to get the information from Monday.com to this tool. So either you need to take all the information from Monday.com, put it into a SQL database, and then you can use the SQL database, which could be used in Power BI. But you need to understand, is that what you need? And again, this is spoken about in the planning stage. Okay. The second question you need to really ask is, how much data do you plan on storing and collecting? Businesses collect so much data. It is insane. And with Monday.com, you collect even more data. Okay. So the thing is that with Monday.com, I know a lot of people that try and use this as a database, and that is Monday.com is not to be used is not to really be used as a database. If you've got like maybe a couple thousand line items, I mean you can use it then, but if you're going to be going over 10,000 line items, then no. Because you see, one of the things about Monday.com, the limitation is a 10,000 line limit. That's for Pro. On Enterprise, that's 20,000. And they currently are working on adding their big board feature, which is most certainly going to be Enterprise, which is going to be 100,000 line items. But anyone in data analytics will tell you 100,000 line items is not a lot. Okay? Really is not. Especially when you're looking at transactional data, you can eat into that very quickly, depending on the size of your organization. So you need to think, okay, if you need to store millions of lines of data, you need to figure out, okay, now suddenly we need to think, okay, Monday.com is the space where we're working with the data, and then once we've worked with the data, we then need to archive it and then stick it into a database somewhere, which will then be able to be utilized in the reporting somewhere else. So then you need to understand exactly how that flow is going to work with part of your process, okay? And then that speaks to question number 3, how often must the data refresh? So the best thing about Monday.com is that if you are using the reporting mechanisms within Monday.com, it is real-time data. Well, I think it's like 1 minute. But that's really good. 1 minute real-time data. That is amazing. Okay, that's beautiful. But if you are needing advanced analytics and you need it in Power BI, or you need it in Click or something along the lines of that, you need to think, how often must the data refresh? Do you need it immediately? Do you need it every hour? Do you need it every half an hour? Or every half an hour, day, week? Just know that obviously when you need to start moving your data to these visualization tools, and the more frequent you need to access the data, the more expensive it could become. Well, I mean, if it's daily, it's fine, and if it's hourly, it depends. But real-time data can be very expensive, especially if you're pulling it from Monday.com and then bring it into your visualization tool. So you really need to understand how often the data must refresh. And then that will give you a very good idea as to how you need to handle your reports, as to what you should build your reports on, whether you can use Monday.com to store your data. Most probably not, but you still need to know that anyway, and how often you want the data to refresh. And that is basically reporting. Now, who can build the reports? Again, Monday.com is with the way that they manage their reports is it's so easy to build reports on Monday.com. It's ridiculous, which is one of the cool features about it. You don't need to really you don't need to be a data analyst in order to build it. Anyone who has some level of data literacy should be able to build a Monday.com report. It is so simple. But if you start, what's the word I'm looking for? If you need to build it in Power BI or click like that, then you're going to need someone that does understand a bit of data, that does understand data analytics and so on. Because the thing is, with Monday.com, it doesn't come in this beautiful table format. You need to transform the data, and then you kind of need to connect the tables together, and only then, once you've actually transformed the data, can you actually start building the visualizations. So obviously there's lots of development required with regards to that, and there is more development cost. But you definitely do get way more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? You definitely get a very detailed level of analytics. Okay, and again, guys, with regards, I have just touched on the basics of reporting. I do talk about exactly how to actually build the briefs for the data analytics and how to make certain that you keep track of that, and also it talks about creating data dictionaries and all of this lovely stuff. There's a lot of information with regards to the reporting side of this, and you would obviously find a lot more information about that in my Ultimate Monday.com Champion Development Program, 2-day virtual program, and yeah, roughly run around 1 month or 2. Happy to put the link in the video below. Okay, guys, and that basically covers it. So to summarize, the 6 elements are planning, development, documentation, onboarding, support and continuous improvement, and reporting. Monday.com is not just about development. You will be in serious problem. You will be in serious trouble if you think that is all it is. You need to understand these 6 elements, and you need to understand that someone has to take responsibility for this. Either you, the person watching this video, if you're deciding to build your system and maintain it yourself, someone in your company who you're going to give this responsibility to, they might not thank you for it, a consulting company like FinLink, a freelancer, or you hire an actual person and you make this their full-time job, depending on the need for it. Okay, but that is pretty much it. So guys, I just want to thank you so much for spending the last hour with me with regards to this. I really hope you got some seriously amazing value, and yeah, I really hope to hear from you guys soon. If you need any Monday.com consulting, or you need training or anything like that, FinLink, that's the company that I'm a co-founder of with Ian and Tristan. We are a bronze partner with Monday.com. We are very good at what we do. I am absolutely in love with Monday.com as a product. I think it is a phenomenal tool, and I think a lot of companies can definitely maximize the value that they have with this. So anyway, thank you so much for spending this hour with me. I really appreciate your time, and yeah, till then, take care, keep well, bye.